Welcome to this evening's pre-concert talk. I'm Roy McEwan, Managing Director of the SCO, and of course it's a great pleasure to have Robin Ticciati. So just to kick off, Robin, when we started talking about projects that we'd like to do once you became principal conductor, one of the ones that came sort of into the frame quite early on was the idea of looking at Stravinsky, chamber ballets and Stravinsky in general. What is it that makes you want to particularly focus in the SCO on music of Stravinsky?
Okay. In the first season, I specifically try to open out sort of lots of doors and get a feel for the orchestra a little more, because I hadn't really worked with them a lot before I was appointed their principal conductor. So we did some, Brahms, Mozart, Beethoven, and I really literally sort of opened all the doors. And I wanted to have a little thread running through this season, and actually it was really Haydn that was the beginning point for it, because my first Highlands tour, I did the Haydn 104, and it was immediately the sound and the classicism of the orchestra. That was the thing that I fell in love with the first moment. I mean, their ability to phrase and shape and tell stories within the classical repertoire. And then Stravinsky, I've always thought Haydn and Stravinsky go so well together, because there's this feeling they both work on the idea of imbalance and games and always keeping you on your toes as a listener. It's a 4-bar phrase, a 7-bar phrase, a sudden silence, and actually they both work in the same way. You can approach them in the same way. And so then I thought about, well, what Stravinsky works are there? And it's incredible you look to his neoclassical works, which we're doing, the Orpheus, the Apollo, and the Jeu de Cartes. And I think that was, apart from the fact that it's such great music for orchestra to get worked into technically, it's virtuosic, it's incredibly hard to play. And it's a bit like, as a chief conductor as well, everyone needs to get up and brush their teeth. And, I'm responsible for that with the orchestra as well. It's very hard. And I want to always challenge them as musicians. And they're incredibly hard pieces. But I think the interesting thing lies in the combination between Haydn and Stravinsky and the sound worlds that I can create and research to create. Because, especially tonight, the Apollo, we start in the classical world. And actually the sound that I'm trying to get is very close to Haydn. And then from there we move into, extreme romanticism or modernism, and we follow his voice. But I think that's the thing, that as a basis we can use our classicism to inform us on how we play the neoclassical repertoire. So I think that's the exciting thing with Stravinsky, knowing how much of emotion to put into it, and knowing how much just to let it speak for itself. And that's a very hard balance, and it's been very exciting trying to find that out.
So the Apollo isn't it the first of the so-called ballad roles of Stravinsky? I mean, in many ways it's only strings, but the textures are amazingly good, aren't they? Although it's a way in it to have a relatively pallid or white texture to it, or a classical texture. It's actually very great in its texture.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about conducting the Apollo. It's because of this ballet problem, there's something almost at a distance about the whole score. You have to, if you get too involved, you somehow break it. And if you step back too much, it's not engaged enough. And it's ethereal, and of course you go through, the images are so clear of, the idea of epic poetry, dance, mime. The movements are very clear. But somehow they need to speak for themselves, and it's getting that character that's so important. And I feel really it's only in the final apotheosis that really he's trying to break through this voice of classicism. He's stretching the harmonies so much. It's his romantic voice coming out so much. And then we return to the opening. I don't know how many of you all know, you probably all know it very well. But we return to the opening music, and it's suddenly the voice of classicism appears again. So we'll be really trying to work with that, but it's the idea of distance that's so important in the music.
You were talking there about romanticism and classicism. In a way, this program on all three is the least conventionally structured, because we open with a big extraordinary Haydn Schiller, and then Apollo, and then Fauré, who isn't quite as obvious a bedbar of the other two, is it?
It might seem quite a stark juxtaposition, but there are many reasons why I wanted to put the Fauré in this program. For a start, actually, it was another thread, because I started by doing the Masqué Bergamasque, which I think we might have done here as well, and then the Pelléas and Mélisande the following year, and I've programmed the Requiem, which we're also bringing here. And so, actually, then we almost ran out of Fauré's orchestral music. But I was playing for a long time on the piano the melody at university, and also just I love to play the piano, you know, and sing in my head, not too much out loud. And this is some of his most remarkable music. And I just had a dream. It was as simple as that to conduct it. And so I thought of Colin Matthews, who just orchestrated the Debussy preludes for the Berlin Philharmonic, or actually I think it was first for the Halle. And the SCO kindly rang him up and he said yes, he'd love to do it. So it's wonderful that that journey's happened and it's here tonight. It's a premiere, he's been with us for the week. And he's so happy with how it's turned out. And I love the way the orchestra are able to really they're so intimate, and we can make such small colours with them. So I think it's perfect for this repertoire. And I think what's interesting is you have Stravinsky the other side of the half, neoclassical. Fauré, the other side, also neoclassical, but a completely different voice. I mean, in his simple textures and harmonies and all the idea of tonic and dominant and the polarity of the harmony, you have a real romanticism in the sound. And I hope that will produce a real foil, but also memories of the Stravinsky. And of course they were both in Paris, and both, you know, created different reactions from everyone at the time. So I hope we have a good bow to the program, and Haydn framing it. I mean, the Scena. How many people? I'd be so interested to know how many people know the Scena di Vernice. Just one. Oh, brilliant. Oh, brilliant. God. Well, I hope you love it. I mean, it is crazy. It is wild. A company recit straight into allegros, then a più largo, then an andante, then another recit, and then a ferocious allegro to end. I mean, she's right on part on the sleeve, and I think that's quite interesting then to return to Stravinsky, who we think of as wild as well. And he's actually incredibly placid. And then we end with the Miracle, the 96th, which is actually deceptively a very hard symphony. I mean, it's always hard, everything's hard. But the shape of it, you know, I've been finding this week the Vivace, the last movement. Sorry, I'm just rambling, but it might interest you. You know, it's a Vivace, it's in 2/4. It's the and this whole idea of what is a Vivace and what is tempo, and how do you get a feeling of dance and life. And it was very interesting the first performance I came out and I thought, God, actually it's just too fast, it's too fast. And actually if something's too fast, then suddenly you can't register anything. And it's always in Haydn, really, when I think in all music, to find the right feel, the tempo. And it's about acoustics, it's about, you know, here the hall that you have is unbelievable. It's perfect because I feel that we can play a note and then we can listen to the end of the note. And it's always about listening to the end of the notes, that then you know when the next note is meant to happen. And if you have a hall that allows you to play with the end of the note, then the possibilities within music are infinite. So it'll be a very different Haydn tonight than from the last two nights, and actually the joy of it is we never know what's going to happen. And I love that about the SCO, that it's constant improvisation. I mean, I hope you'll hear in the performances that we do that, you know, there are all these pianos and fortes and pauses. None of that's rehearsed. And I love that about them. You know, you can't really go to many orchestras and expect immediately that sense of freedom. But they're ready to really play and see what's there. And we'll wait, but it takes everyone. It's very nice, but this hall allows us to do it as well. I went completely off the track.
It doesn't. Sorry. Actually, just before we go on to the next thing, I'm sort of trying to get back on the track. The Fauré,
yes.
You to make it work as an orchestration.
Yeah, it's incredible what he's done. It's really incredible. Interested, the two things that are very different, you know, having played them on the piano. The first one, fleur jetée, which starts in the right hand, and the pedal goes down, and it's sort of wild. You know, we don't have a sustaining pedal so much in the orchestra, so actually what you hear is trumpets, and then cellos and bassoons, and it's a little drier, it's a little starker, and actually that's an example where you need to kind of detach yourself a little bit from the shape that a piano will make. But you know, the second song, Nocturne, where it's just, in the piano, it's just dee, dee, you know, just a chord and a simple chord. You know, it's bass clarinet, harp, crotale, sustained strings, and the sound world is suddenly, it's incredible. It's really wonderful. So he's really made magic out of them. The Clair de Lune, that was a real process. It's the one where you know the melody, the real modal one, and it starts. That is in the right hand, and the left hand's just going like a kind of lute. It's an antique style, and so he had it in the harp. That was the left hand in the harp, and in the right hand the oboe. But he also had strings going bum, bum, bing, bum, and we did this quite a lot. It's just like, I don't think it sounds right, Colin. Which thankfully he was able to say, okay. And I said, can we try and just take out the strings? And we took out the strings, and the strings then came in bar 4, where we have the G major, to sort of create a halo of sound. And it was right having that two-part counter, and I think it worked better. And so it was real discovery of the week as well. We really sort of changed little things, and he was very open for that. It was a real wonderful man.
But what other ballet scores by Stravinsky? I mean, not necessarily the SCO, but the whole range of extraordinary works. I mean, in many ways he's quite unique amongst great composers, and his commitment to ballet right through his life.
Yeah.
And do you see yourself perhaps in time tackling some of the big early scores or some of the later neoclassical ones?
Definitely. I mean, my journey is long, and I hope slow, and I plan things very carefully. And, you know, the Rite of Springs, the Petrushkas, of course, I have kind of in my heart going, you know, waiting to come out. But actually, the wonderful thing about starting with something like Orpheus or Apollo is that you kind of meet the bed linen before you actually enter the room. It's sort of, I really get to know some of the workings in a different way, rather than just set out on my first Rite of Spring, which is planned. I really take time about which pieces I do first, and I hope that when I do the Rite of Spring, that I'm influenced by what came afterwards and what came before. I did the Firebird. Not the earlier, but the later suite, which is, of course, he reached the berceuse and the bassoon and the horn melody, and it's one of the most remarkable things in music. And he's a master. He's a chameleon. You know, you never quite know what he's thinking. I never quite know whether he's sort of going, yeah, I know you're all crying, but shall I tell you what, I'm laughing. I sort of find that with him, and I love that. I mean, we can. It's our own response, you know. He's the master craftsman, sort of like Strauss. Maybe apart from in the 4 last songs, at the end, towards the Indian summer, where you begin to think, God, wow, this is really meaning something pretty remarkable here.
Just one last question before we open it up for questions on the floor. We've talked about Haydn and Stravinsky as two composers who you've identified as journeys to take with the SCO. There are others as well that we've spoken about, for instance, Berlioz is a particular passion. What are your thoughts on whether it's Berlioz or other composers who you see as perhaps critical to the development of the relationship with the orchestra and partnership?
Yeah, well, at the moment, Haydn's very, something I'm working very hard on, doing lots of research. And, you know, I mean, one bar of Haydn, where he's got a set of quavers and he's got staccato dots over them, and then the next bar he's got daggers over them. You know, I'm still trying to find out really what on earth it all means. How on earth are we meant to play this? And so it's taking a long time. It's wonderful just to have a little bit of more long-term perspective with the orchestra about planning pieces. And so Haydn's a big project in my mind. And Berlioz, and I've always loved Berlioz, but interestingly enough, it was when, I don't know if any of you were at we did the Cleopatra, the death of Cleopatra with Karen Cargill. And that was my first bit of Berlioz with the orchestra, and it was just exactly how I wanted it to sound. What I mean is this clarity of line and the comprehension of this orchestra searches for phrasing with me. And I think Berlioz is a real maverick, and you get most orchestras just playing it and seeing what it's going to sound like, but we really try and search for where the different harmonies are and what he's trying to mean. And I think by that we can tell a real story with it. So Berlioz there are still some pieces which I think will suit a chamber orchestra that I would love to do with the L'Enfance du Christ. I really enjoy. I mean, that was a very special moment for me to do my first L'Enfance du Christ with this orchestra. And Les Nuits d'été will come, you all know that. So Berlioz and Haydn. And then, I mean, so none of this is particularly radical, but you know, there's Beethoven. I mean, my God. I really need to take a lot of time with that guy. But it's so interesting that I've always been, well, I don't know if it's interesting for you, but I would say, for me, I've always been very obsessed by Mozart. I mean, and his classicism and his response to humanity on a kind of universal level that he almost doesn't get too involved, and he understands us and he paints us, but he doesn't get dirty with us. And just recently I found that, crikey, you know, this life is you've got to face it as well, and Beethoven's the person that you have to face it with as well. And he's hard, and you've got to struggle, and I've got to risk to make nasty noises, and it's not all about beauty, it's about fear and horror, and so Beethoven is going to be dropped in every so often just to terrify my soul.
Thank you very much indeed for coming.
Thank you.